Have you ever lost someone? That's a bit of a heavy question, given the fact that this video is coming out during a raging pandemic. But I guess it doesn't necessarily even mean to have someone die. I guess the better question to ask is, has anyone ever really exited your life? I'm guessing the answer is probably yes. We're human beings after all, it's what we do. We grow close and then sometimes gradually, sometimes rapidly, we separate. However, have you ever stopped to think about the impact that you've made on that person you no longer speak with? Or maybe the impact that they made on you? A recent manga I've picked up sort of brought this all rushing to the forefront of my mind, and it's something I've been thinking about almost non-stop since. That manga is called, and I'm gonna butcher this part, Sousou no Frieren, or Frieren at the Funeral. A quick editor's note here, I've been reading it as Frieren in my head, so that's the way I'm gonna pronounce it. Frieren at the Funeral puts an interesting spin on this thought. What if you were nigh on immortal? How does that change your view of those around you? How does that change how they view you? A slew of rhetorical questions aside, this manga is very early in its publication, but it's landed deep in my daily thoughts, and I really want to talk about it. It does so many things that I think are cool that I can't really not make a video about it. So do me a favor, grab your adventuring party, pull up a seat next to the digital bonfire, and let me tell you all about Frieren at the Funeral, impacting others. So I guess to begin, what is it about Frieren at the Funeral that's made it so impactful to me? Well, a bit of context first, it's a fantasy manga. It started in April of 2020 and it's created by two relative rookies. Responsible for the story and writing is Yamada Kanehito, whose My Anime list shows only 2 other works, and neither really seemed to find much mainstream success. And the art is done by a complete rookie, Tsukasa Abe, with this being their first work. The story is, refreshingly enough, not an isekai, just a straight-up fantasy world that I'm pretty sure hasn't really been explicitly named yet. It has all the trappings of your standard isekai, classic D&D fantasy classes like mage, warrior, and monk, more little towns and hamlets than you can shake a truck accident at, and of course, a Dark Lord. And while I'm not the biggest fan of these trappings in your seasonal isekai anime, as they're pretty overplayed at this point in my opinion, Frieren manages to feel fresh again, mostly because of the fact that the world isn't forced to play from a fish-out-of-water perspective. All the characters know what's going on in this world, and they don't have to explain it to anybody. And here's the thing that makes that world pretty interesting. Much like I said in my Goku Shufudo video, this world, and the titular main character Frieren, they've already had their character arcs. This is what I mean. The manga begins once the Dark Lord has been defeated by the hero party. A group of 4 adventurers, Himmel the human hero, Aizen the dwarf warrior, Hyder the human priest, and Frieren the elven mage, stroll back into a town being celebrated after their victory against the Dark Lord. The action that most of your standard isekai work towards as their endgame is where Frieren at the Funeral picks up its story. This takes what is a very common setup in the modern landscape of manga, anime, and light novels, and gives it a breath of new life simply by shifting the timeline to the end of the adventure. I guess I got distracted and never really answered my rhetorical question. So again, what's the impact here? It's that shift away from the primary story beats of your Campbellian hero's journey to focus on the happily ever after and what happens once most stories end, as well as how it handles the passage of time that makes Frieren such an interesting read. To show you what I mean, let me go over the first chapter. The first chapter introduces us to our aforementioned hero party, just after they defeated the Dark Lord and returned to the city. After all the bestowing of medals, adulation, and celebration, we find our group spending a quiet moment in the outskirts of the castle, watching a once-in-a-half-century meteor shower. They spend a few quiet moments reflecting on their finished adventure, and what it means for the world, only to promise that they'll all meet up there again in 50 years to watch their meteor shower together as a party, one last time. And if you know anything about Tolkien-esque fantasy, you'll know that humans live their average lifespan of about 100 years max. Dwarves are quite long-lived, usually living a couple hundred years, and elves are nigh on unaging, watching centuries pass as humans would watch hours. So, needless to say, that as our party goes their separate ways, there's a real sense of melancholy that the reader can feel as our 2 human companions speak on this matter and wonder if they'll make it to the next meteor shower. They do, thankfully, as we see a lifetime pass between page turns, represented by this shopkeeper. And Frieren makes her way back towards their meeting spot. And here, she encounters the great hero of the world, the man at the head of the party who slew the Dark Lord and became a legend in his own time, Himmel. And he's now a decrepit old man, defeated by time and nearly on death's door. The party's now together again, for possibly the last time, and they all look noticeably older, with the exception of Frieren. They make their journey to see the star shower, reminiscing on the good old days of their adventures, and eventually reaching the mountaintop to watch the meteor shower. It's a beautiful and touching moment that feels really well earned and set up. However, with the page turn, the flow of time passes in an instant once more, and we find ourselves at the hero Himmel's funeral. Seemingly hundreds have gathered to see this hero off into the afterlife. not the least of all his traveling companions. This is where the gut punch of the first chapter comes flying in out of nowhere. Because up till now, our titular Frieren has been stoic, uncaring, a little clumsy, and most of all, aloof. The process of the entire journey to defeat the Dark Lord took 10 years, which to a human is not an insignificant amount of time by any stretch of the imagination. But to an elf, 10 years is next to nothing. Combined with the fact that prior and following their journey, Frieren didn't really know or spend time with the group. She spent her 50 years between meteor showers on her own, collecting magic, because 50 years wandering alone to an elf is like spending an afternoon wandering around a park to us. So this is why it hit me so hard to turn the page and see a teary-eyed Frieren saying, "I simply traveled with him for 10 years, with a look of almost panic on her face, as you can see that she's slowly realizing that even though they shared very little time together in the grand scheme of her life, Himmel has made a massive impact on her. Even though I knew a human's lifespan was so short, why did I never think about getting to know him better?" Frieren asks herself rhetorically. Frieren is now ready to start her journey, but not a journey to collect some mystical object or defeat some Dark Lord, but a quest to actually try and begin to understand and connect with the people that she's always found too fleeting to bother with. She sets out on the road, leaving behind her 2 aging companions to learn about humans and their brief lives in this world. This central theme of learning to connect with those that you normally wouldn't associate with is rooted in just about every piece of narrative going forward from this first chapter. Watching Frieren grow and gain new companions, taking time to learn and be mindful of them and their time spent on this planet is just a joy to read. So what does this all have to do with my philosophical waxing at the beginning of the video? You know, all that mess about the effect we have on others and how they affect us? Well, all of this comes into play from the second chapter onward. For the first 15 or so chapters, there really isn't any plot, so to speak of, at least not in the grand scope that you might expect. Frieren reunites with Heider, the priest from her group, 20 years after Himmel's death, and he's on his deathbed as well. She agrees to take on his protege, a young human mage named Fern, and teach her magic. They spend their days wandering the world, searching for magic, and eventually, after 7 years of traveling together, Fern manages to drag out Frieren's true purpose from her. Frieren wants to retrace the party's steps on their way to defeat the Dark Lord, in an effort to get to know Himmel better. The setup lends itself to my point perfectly. We get to see Frieren, Fern, and eventually the protege of the group's original warrior, a young man named Stark, go from town to town that had already been saved by the hero party 80 years later, and see how their actions have affected those towns. And it's usually in small, almost imperceptible ways, but they're hugely impactful on those around them. For example, they spend time in a place called Turk, in which the original hero party had passed through earlier and defeated a monster, freeing it from its tyranny. They come across an elderly woman, who takes Frieren and Fern to a statue of the hero Himmel, left in disrepair by time and negligence. The elderly woman asks her to clean it up because she doesn't want his deeds to be forgotten. After cleaning it up, the woman suggests planting flower beds, because that might draw more visitors who would then in turn continue honoring his memory. This leads to a half-a-year journey to find just the right flowers, because Frieren remembered that Himmel mentioned that they were from his home region. And finally, upon completion, the elderly woman is full with the nostalgia of being a young girl again. Now, this is a pretty inconsequential series of events, but here Frieren is, 80 years later, being reminded of the kindness shown by a specific man and how that's resonated throughout the years to increase the quality of life of near strangers. I think this is some amazing messaging that feels timelier than ever in the current state of the world. A gesture of kindness, be it either grand or minuscule in scope, is often remembered and appreciated long after you might expect it to be. And this is just one town. The majority of the manga is full of towns and situations similar to this in which Frieren can grasp these small bits of Himmel's personality through his gestures. However, she can use these moments to increase the quality of life of those who are now involved in her life, and continue the cycle forward. Here's a bit more of an extrapolated example. To me, Frieren at the Funeral feels like the side quest from a JRPG, from the perspective of the quest givers. When you walk into the sleepy little hamlet as the main character on their epic quest to slay God, and agree to kill 10 goblins that have been terrorizing the village, it doesn't really mean much to you, both as the player and the character within the game world. At best, it's a quick way to earn some coinage and maybe some XP, and at worst, it feels like a slog that you need to check off your list so you can shut up those 100% completion gremlins in the back of your brain. But reading Frieren at the Funeral made me think about it from the perspective of the villager who's asking for that favor. In the game world, you're literally saving lives. They're a helpless little town, with no one skilled or brave enough to fight off this terror. Their liege lord or king or whomever decides they don't have enough manpower or desire to help. You, this spiky-haired teenager with your band of misfits, are their only hope for salvation from certain death at the hands of some horrid monsters. In the grand, god-killing, heaven-shaking series of events that make up the course of that video game, between all the twists and turns, epic encounters, and battles for survival, taking a few moments out to help the metaphorical little guy may not seem like much, but Frieren makes the point of showing you that just how far these gestures can go. The final thing I really want to make note of is how the passage of time is handled in Sousou no Frieren. One of the coolest parts about reading Frieren is how it makes the reader feel like they're an ageless being themselves. The shopkeeper example I mentioned earlier is just one such example of these occurring moments of large time skips around the manga. You know how in many manga or anime, the time skip is generally an exciting moment? Your 3D 2Y from One Piece, your Shippuden in Naruto, or your post-Spiral King Gurren Lagann are some of the most exciting portions in not only their own respective shows, but in their mediums as a whole. Because these were massive changes that can only take place over the relatively long time of multiple years. Here in Frieren, time skips are seen from Frieren's point of view, rather than by humans. And by that I mean they're barely given any notice at all. I think Frieren and Stark said it best in a conversation where Stark says, "I've been in this village for 3 years." To which Frieren responds, "That's ephemeral." And Stark replies, "That's eternity." This difference in perspective is put on full display in the timeline of our story. Between the first and second chapters, 20 years pass, and another 8 quickly pass after that. It is perhaps the most succinct and effective method to show how fleeting these moments are to Frieren. The manga revels in these fleeting moments, though. At times, it will dedicate multiple pages to these small vignettes and to a moment of travel. Small things like a morning routine or riding a cart in the woods are given huge amounts of time to breathe. There won't be any dialogue, just an instant in time when the reader can assume that Frieren is attempting to appreciate these moments with her companions as she attempts to learn more about them. And I think that's all I can really say about Frieren right now. Like I said, it's still relatively new at the time of writing this. I think it could definitely have a good run ahead of it as it's started working on more of a main quest to go along with its side questing. It's a beautiful manga with an incredible atmosphere of reflection and melancholy at times, but isn't afraid to have a bit of fun with its usually stoic characters. And hell, it made me care about side quests in JRPGs, which is a feat within itself. Regardless, go give this manga a try. See if you can binge it in one session. I know you won't regret it. Sincerely, your friend Spiral. Hey everybody, Spiral here. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the episode. Hope you enjoyed it. I love this manga, it's super cool. You should go read it if you hadn't. If I get one person to read it, that's cool with me. Video's a success. But these videos take a very long time to make. I'm trying to get one video essay out a month, especially these manga ones. Manga videos take forever. I work full-time as well as, do side work and stuff like that, so my time is limited, and if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you subscribed, liked, commented, shared to your friends, relatives, loved ones, anyone who might care or who might not care. I appreciate every view. Small channel, trying to grow is tough these days, and all the work I put in, I'd like people to see my stuff. So, if you enjoyed it, please feel free to leave me a comment and tell me what you liked about it, or tell me what you didn't like. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. Trying to get more active on social media, but I'm not good at that either. Regardless, appreciate you watching. Thanks.